Welcome to the Michigan Golfer Show. Join us each week as we explore the people, the places, and the events that shape our great game.
Okay, Tony, now you've got a book with a whole lot of information. How did you get into this? How did you get into this business? You're an architect, right?
I'm a building architect, practiced in the Detroit area for 40 years, in Birmingham and in Southfield. Did projects all over the world. But before I was an architect, I was interested in golf course architecture because of the fact that my golf pro in Port Huron was at Black River Country Club was Emil Beck. And Emil Beck was the founder of the PGA of America's golf school back in those days in Dunedin, Florida. And he was also an architect on the golf course architect on the side. So when I was 13, 14, 15 years old, I was learning the game under Emil, but I was more interested in watching him make changes to some of the holes on the golf course. And of course, at that point, that was the first time that I realized that golf courses didn't just happen. Somebody decided the bunker went there, somebody decided the green went there, and they should be in this kind of a relationship, you know. So Emil I watched him do some of that. I didn't realize at the time that he was working from a master plan by Bill Diddle, the famous Indiana architect. And so before I was into building architecture, I was into Emil's work in golf course architecture. And then unfortunately, or fortunately, I had the opportunity to see a couple of buildings by Louis Sullivan and Frank Lloyd Wright, and that just changed the world at that point for me. And I became a golf course or a building architect, and went to Syracuse, went to Taliesin, studied at the Wright Fellowship for a year or so, and graduated all my degrees from Syracuse, and came to Michigan and practiced with Gunnar Burkhardt for 24 years. So had a kind of a side tour before I got back into golf course.
Well, you're kind of the right man for golf then, right?
Yes. I am a Frank Lloyd Wright man for golf. And believe it or not, both of those came together for me. Robert Trent Jones was, when I was at Taliesin, Robert Trent Jones was designing the spring green in Spring Green, Wisconsin. So we were doing the clubhouse at that point. Later on, I did a lot of work for Tom Monahan out at Domino's Farms. We developed the building out there, and there were several times when there were going to be architects, golf courses involved. And so I got a chance to meet again Robert Trent Jones 20 years later, and met him, and Harry Bowers was with him. You know, Harry is
a good friend,
and Harry's a Michigan guy too. Did the Rock, absolutely, for Monahan, and so I got a chance to meet with Trent Jones again. Later on, they brought up the Arnold Palmer Group with Ed Say and Eric Larson from there, and met Tom Doak as part of that organization before Tom Doak was Tom Doak, you know, kind of thing. So, but just as intense and just as interested, and obviously a guy who was going to go places in that world.
Well, Tom got in with Pete Dye, you know, picking up rocks and raking traps and that sort of thing. The way they start out, and he's certainly been one of the best around the world, and we're fortunate to have him right up in Traverse City.
Right here in Michigan, yes. So anyway, back to how I got started here. The other thing that happened as a school kid growing up in Port Huron was we didn't play Black River for our golf team. We played Port Huron Golf Club. And in those days, quite honestly, with the omniscience of youth, we thought it was a rinky-dink golf course. And part of that was the fact that every single green was a circle. Every single green was a circle, a small circle in this big green pad. What I later learned words like green pad, you know, and things. And the bunkers had no relationship to the greens; they were just over there someplace. And so at that time, we didn't think much of the golf course. Many years later, in 2001 and 2, the club brought in David Savick, whose firm Old Course Design at that time. David came up and had a chance to restore all the greens at one time, and the club had the money for that. And he spent weeks and days and months and years going over with a probe and trying to find where the greens were and so on the golf course. And by the time he was done with it, all of a sudden we had greens that were 2 and 3 times the size of what I played in high school. And all of a sudden the bunkers started to make sense.
Now, he's from Columbus?
Dave Savick is from Columbus.
Pandal Savick is his father, who was tied real tight to Jack Nicklaus.
Real tight to Jack Nicklaus.
Great friends.
Pandal Savick was David's father. Was just died recently, unfortunately, and was a good friend of Jack Nicklaus. But where the connection came together was that Pandal Savick was a football hero.
Right.
He was the guy who beat Michigan and went on to the Rose Bowl back in the 1949-50 season kind of thing. And
well, he was in on when Jack did the memorial down there, and Pandal was like the #1 guy around there when the tournament started down there, and Pandal was the guy you always wanted to see. He was real friendly, and Jack, to tell you the truth, was not. He was not like his dad, Charlie. He was more like his mother, who was kind of an introvert. And Jack didn't really warm up publicly until quite a few years later on, Palmer finally got to him. Ernie finally got him smiling and laughing and talking with people.
Yeah, and Pandal clearly was the people person behind the Muirfield whole development, not just the golf course, but the whole development of it and getting the money involved and so on. And I was fortunate enough to meet Pandal later in life before he died, and spent several days in his home with him and got a chance to feel his personality. And he was just a wonderful person to be with. And his son, who did the work at Port Huron back in those days and developed in 2014 updated our master plan. His son is now back working directly for Jack, and has been a design associate for Jack for many years.
Well, Jack's got a lot of business now. all around the world, it's picked up again.
Right. So anyway, the Port Huron. So when we finally in 2001, 2002, we got a chance to play our new. We call it our new golf course because all of a sudden the greens are. With the scale of the golf course, the scale of the greens is much different, and at that point, I started to pay real attention. And one day, along about 2008-9, they were developing a 100-year anniversary program, and in that program, they showed one drawing, green drawing in that program. And I had done enough research to know what a Harry Colt drawing looked like, and I said, "This is it." And except that the handwriting wasn't exactly like Colt's, but the format was. And I talked to our general manager at the time, and I said, "Where did this drawing come from?" And he said, "We got lots of those, and I'll get them." Eureka! I'll get them for you. And I about fell off my chair. And about 2 weeks later, I got this envelope in my locker, and took it home, and pulled out. And turns out Port Huron Golf Club has 8 original drawings.
And that finally in our picture with all the drawings, and we're going to. Have you talk about Port Huron a little bit more later on. So stay tuned, folks. I'm with Tony Gholz here at the Suburban Showcase, the biggest golf show in the business.